This is the Public Art Advisory Committee, Tuesday, September 27th, 2022 at 4:30 p.m. This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and the committee while allowing for public participation. The public may address the committee using exclusively remote public comment option. The committee may take action on any item listed in the agenda. The public may join this meeting, or they may give remote public comments via email, aibera@brisbaneca.org, or they may text 415-407-2675. All right. Do a quick roll call. Councilmember Cunningham.
I'm here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Chair Davis.
Here.
Vice Chair Salmon.
Here.
Park and Rec Commissioner Greenlee absent. Park and Recreation Commissioner Sewell absent. Committee Member Grossman absent. Okay. We get an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Chair Davis.
Aye.
Vice Chair Salmon.
Aye.
And that's the last. Okay, and no minutes to approve. And so our guest this evening should be joining us here in a little bit. So if we would like to just discuss maybe, what would you like to?
Yeah, Danette's all over this.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, I'm looking at the agenda, but it was pertaining to yesterday's, and I have Bridget. What is her name? Today.
Tonight is Christine Jones from the city of San Diego.
Okay, Christine Jones. All right. So before we start, I think we'll talk again that we have just reminder that we have 15 questions, 30 minutes. That's 2 minutes a question. So Stuart, if you can ask and do your introduction again and see what their hard cutoff is, and maybe we can gauge if they can extend longer. That would be, again, maybe 4 minutes per question. I will try to move it along within whatever time frame we have. I just wanted to confirm with those who were here yesterday that the process went well. Did it work when you needed to ask questions? Raise your hand. Or like I asked some additional questions, trying to get some information out. Is there any feedback that you want to give me on what you thought did or didn't work yesterday?
I personally thought it went really well, and that we had time to ask the questions pertaining to the questions that you asked. And then there was time for a little more kind of overview of questions. I thought it went really well.
Yeah,
and it
me too.
was clear and quick.
Excuse me, guys. I gotta find my glasses. Sorry. But no,
Okay,
I totally concur with what Camille just said.
Okay, the other thing is, I think that it became clear to us that part of the reason for the consultant for Belmont was to establish their fee structure, which we already have that. But I thought that the interesting thing that seemed to come out as part of their overall art plan, master plan, is they don't have, it sounds like, contracts as part of that. It sounds like that wasn't part of their package. And so,
Jeanette, excuse me, but I think what I heard was, yes, when they did the master plan, they did not start from the place where we started, where they had the fees for public arts, number one. But I think what she said was that each contract that they have per art endeavor had its own contract, was particular to its own contract.
Yes, but what Danette's saying is that they did not have as part of their master plan somebody writing a master contract for them. And if that might be one of those things that this group might want to have as a master, basically, we have, as a city, we do have master agreements that we used and we provide to the different consultants we use. And then we change them as needed for the particular job.
So when we say contract, we're talking a contract for the person who's helping to put together the master
We,
plan or the artist?
we have we will have a contract for that. I think what I heard Bridget say yesterday, and I'm sorry, Danette, for cutting you off, is that she would recommend that if we can get a master contract for the future artists as part of the master plan, so that way artists understand what our master contract is, that we can then work with artist by artist. And each artist will have a contract, but it will be based off of a master contract, which would include things like what happens if, it needs to be switched out, who's responsible for maintenance, what kind of maintenance. I mean, we have all that with our artwork at the library because, Michael Roush has done contracts with artists before. And that's why, and we had that with the library. So that'll be, I think, a good conversation topic for the committee as we move through what we want to have in the RFP for the master contract. Did I get
Well,
that?
Yeah, I think maybe it sounds like they didn't have any even guidelines in their.
No, they did not. Like we did. We already have guidelines.
Right, so I think some things came out that seem like they may be missing in there, so that was just something that stuck out in my mind, and as I recall, the San Diego was a very thick document, it's a very extensive, so they probably have that in there, I don't recall, but I don't know, we got about 5 minutes before we're meeting with this person. Does anybody have another question or a topic that they think that needs to be added to the 15 questions? Okay, so we'll try to, we just keep that in mind. They have roughly 2 minutes according to what we have scheduled, unless they have more time. That might go up to 4 minutes if they continue for another half hour beyond that. So some answers I think are quicker, and then we'll have a little bit more time for other answers if they're more in depth. So just bear in mind that if you have a question, we just need to try to get a quick answer on that as best we can. And I will continue to try to remind what time frame we are so we know, how much time is left and try to get through the list. Okay, any comments from anybody on that? No? Okay, so are they awaiting it or no? If they're waiting.
They just popped in. Perfect timing.
Okay, that way we have a couple minutes. Stuart, I'll just let you do the introductions, and then we can each introduce ourselves and then get right. I'll start reading off the questions.
Okay.
Sound good? Thank you.
Hi, Christine.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Stuart Schillinger, the city's assistant city manager. And we really appreciate the amount of time you're taking to help us understand what we need to do for our master plan process. To give you a little bit of background, the Public Art Committee has been in place for a couple of years, but we don't have a public art master plan. And I think we recently had a couple of new members appointed to it. So as you know, with all committees and commissions, as you appoint new members, you're reconstituting it pretty much from scratch every time. So we're very excited to have San Diego's perspective on what we need to do for our master plan. I know we've asked for about 30 minutes of your time until about 5:15. We have 15 questions, so if we can go beyond the 5:15 time, that would be great. But if we can't, let us know and we can follow up maybe with more questions at a later date.
Happy to speak with you as long as we need to today.
Oh, we appreciate that. With that, maybe what I'll do is I'll let the committee members introduce themselves so you know who you're talking with. And I'll start with the chair, Danette Davis. Oh, and I know you've already been in contact with Angel, who's our other staff person for the committee. So sorry, Danette.
Hi, Christine. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Danette Davis, and I'm a community member, chairperson of the committee. So thank you again. Camille?
Hi, nice to meet you, Christine. I'm Camille. I'm the co-chair and I'm community member.
Karen?
Hi, Christine. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it. Karen Cunningham, City Council member, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Hi, I'm Madison, Brisbane City Councilwoman. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
And just so you're aware, Christine, we have 3 other members who are not available today. 2 of them are the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we have a combination of Parks and Recreation, council members and public. And the 3rd person is another member of the public who isn't available today. But as I said, we're very excited to talk with you, and Danette's going to lead the conversation from here.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. All right, we're going to start off with the first category of budget. So our first question is, how did you determine the initial budget to be able to hire the consultant? I think I recall yours is, you've had your master plan for a while, so I don't know if you know that, but how did you come up with that?
So first of all, it's a pleasure to meet everybody. So, and thank you for having me today. So I'll share my insights and be able to answer most of your questions, but some of them are kind of, you know, our master plan has been in place since 2004. So I came on and have been working with this program since policy implementation, which was kind of after the plan. So I can speak to it from a couple different angles. So to start with, to answer your question, I don't know. I looked and I couldn't find too much information about the initial budget, but I can tell you how we do our processes now. So for example, right now, I'm the lead project manager on a cultural planning process for the city of San Diego. So that's a huge undertaking that we're just initiating. So as far as that process went, in determining the budget allocation for a cultural planner, which is somewhat similar to a public art planner, and sometimes they do cross over. We obviously reached out, just like you are, to various other cities to understand, you know, if what their planning process entailed and what their budget was. From that, we, you know, were able to determine what made sense for the city of San Diego, and you know, issued an RFP based on an all-inclusive budget based on the scope that we outlined. And just for your reference, our cultural planning process, our budget's $350,000. I would assume that a public art master planning process would be less, because a cultural planning process is much more comprehensive, and city, you know, has a lot more angles than just public art. Public art's just one of many, many other facets for that kind of a process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question is, did you feel that the initial budget was accurate, but you don't really, that's probably part of the, you don't know. And were there different expenses that were anticipated? Do you know any answers to those questions?
I think, I mean, I would imagine or envision from what I've been able to infer just from our archives and such, is that it was an all-inclusive budget. So there was an expectation that the contractor fulfill the city's scope of service. So that's where that scope of service that you guys actually scope is going to be really important, because that's what you can hold your, you know, planning consultant accountable to.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next question is, were there issues or snags in the contract that you wish you knew about beforehand? Like I said, some of this might predate when they were there, but
Yeah,
anyways,
I'm
I'm
not
asking.
aware. Yeah, I'm not aware of anything. But just if, you know, a few things to think through would be your timeline. And really, again, having that scope worked out, giving the, when you issue an RFP, you're going to want to have a really defined kind of introduction, context for your planning process. You're going to want to give them background. You know, is there any history of of a public art, kind of maybe more ad hoc or voluntary program that you guys have facilitated. And then you're going to really want to define the different frameworks and steps or deliverables that you guys are expecting as part of that process. And then how long your process will be. Most planning processes, whether it's public art or cultural planning, typically take anywhere between 12 and 24 months, just depending on how much community engagement or public engagement you're looking for and just how long you want to stretch it out, basically.
Okay, thank you. And was there anything that you would add or delete from the initial contract to make a better end product?
I mean, I can't speak to that, but I can say just in general that I think it's really important to be real specific in your deliverables, your expectations, how many meetings you're expecting with them, outlining a deliverable, maybe to start with as the kickoff meeting with them, where you really solidify your timeline. You should tell them your expectation of how many months you're envisioning it taking, in the RFP. But the first meeting will be kickoff to just clarify everything once you have, a consultant under contract. And then, one of your first deliverables from the consultant would probably be a public engagement plan and strategy. And you want to really think about that plan in terms of making sure that, if you want it to be citywide, if you want them to really cultivate and engage specific types of communities or audiences, how, from just an inclusivity and equity perspective in that lens. So there's different things to think about in terms of the public engagement component. And then I think it will be a period of giving them any documentation you have, any historical documentation. Do you have any policies or guidelines, anything that you've worked on prior? So they have kind of all that city foundational information, whether the city has a general plan, does it have any other types of plans, anything like that could help inform what is the process for capital improvement projects, what is the process for that a developer has to go through in your city in order to, develop and what types of fees they pay. All of that information will be helpful to the consultant as they start to understand how public art can fit into and integrate into the city's overall kind of planning and different function areas.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to master plan, are there any questions from committee members that you would like to ask or add or clarify? No. Okay. On master plan, how did you and the consultant get the community involved?
So,
Do you know?
yeah, I mean, I could just tell you about it and from my perspective. So the city contracted with, a particular consultant. They had a scope of service that basically was, the public art planning process, and then the deliverable of the actual plan at the end. And obviously a big component of that, and I'm sure that you're thinking of that, is going to be, again, that public engagement component. So you really want to, so in terms of what the city of San Diego did, that was a deliverable, that the consultant kind of worked with the staff at the time to identify who all those stakeholders were. They did some interviews with about 150 different stakeholders. Those stakeholders were a cross section of artists, arts and cultural organizations, art businesses, contractors, developers. There were elected officials involved. There was a steering committee created. So there was a lot of stakeholders that interface or connected with the consultant, in addition to kind of the interviews. They met periodically with the steering committee to kind of update them and get feedback along the way as the framework was developed, as the draft was developed, and as the final product was developed. But, there was engagement with the general public as well through like, more communal or town hall type structure meetings. I think you might be on mute.
Muted.
Okay. With that process, what worked and what didn't?
I wasn't there, but what I can say is the final product, which was the public art master plan, was foundational in being able to shift the city of San Diego's public art program into something that was more mandated versus voluntary. Prior to the master plan, it was a voluntary program. So the master plan basically set the stage for then policy work that was informed by the plan that actually became either city council policy or what we call San Diego Municipal Code, which is essentially the law here in the city of San Diego. So different kind of parts of the plan informed that and really was foundational in being able to professionalize and again mandate the program.
Okay, thank you. And was the process collaborative?
As far as I can tell, it was highly collaborative. There was a steering committee. In addition to the steering committee, there was engagement of the Commission for Arts and Culture, which is an advisory board that advises the mayor and city council. So they were engaged, and their committee, the Public Art Committee, which is a committee of the Commission for Arts and Culture, which is comprised of some commissioners, but also artists and architects and other kind of public art field experts. So they were all heavily engaged in the process.
Okay, thank you. Do you know how long it took?
What I could tell was that it took about 12 to 18 months, but I can't pinpoint specifically the number of months, but it looked like it was at least a year to year and a half process from beginning to end.
Okay, thank you. And how or where did you advertise to find the consultant, if you know that that was ultimately hired to do your master plan?
Well, I don't know what was done back then, but I would tell you what I would do now if I was doing this. And that is, well, I would, work with your purchasing and contracting department to issue an RFP. And then, that's obviously the tool to solicit, proposers in terms of where you would actually promote multiple places. There's a thing called PAX SoCal, which is a place where you can advertise. Typically is where we advertise public art opportunities, but a lot of public art administrators that work independently check that too. So PAX SoCal, Public Art Coalition of Southern California. I would post it with American for the Arts. I would post it on various creative placemaking kind of organizational websites. AIA, architects. I would post it at the American Planning Organization, is that APA? So, a lot of those kind of planning type organizations and move it through LinkedIn as well. But you really want a planner that focuses on cultural planning and or public art planning. And they are out there. They're not that many, but they are out there.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how do you find a consultant that is experienced without getting that cookie cutter master plan, one that will really delve into the community?
I think it goes back to first figuring out what your scope of service is, and then identifying what you're looking for in a consultant. Like what do you want what experience or knowledge do you want them to have, right? That's going to be the baseline for evaluating their proposals. In terms of cookie cutter, I think you would want, again, just to hone what you want in a consultant, hone the scope of service, and target specific planners that you guys have researched or started to come up with your own list. So the other thing that I would do would be to, who did the public art master plans for, comparable cities to your size across the country, and start coming up with a list of those planners, and then send out to those planners when you release the RFP, send it out to them. So they can consider whether they want to apply.
Okay. Thank you. Before we move on to reflection, any committee members want to add or have questions to a master plan questions? Nope. Okay. Oh, Camille, go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry. I have a question. We're on reflections, right?
We're gonna be there. We're
Oh, never mind.
wrapping up.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Okay, so, all right, so now we'll move on to reflections. What did you learn, mistakes, and what makes you excited that came out of the master plan? Maybe even if you weren't here, like the document that you have to work with that's done. So maybe from your experience.
So what did we learn? We learned that it was foundational to be able to pivot the program. It did create a foundation and a guide that could inform policy, right? So what you want is, at the end of the day, a plan's a plan. So if you want to have, legal mechanisms to mandate things that maybe come out of the plan. So for example, if you want to have a 2% for art program, that's mandated with a funding mechanism to be able to integrate artwork into your city's capital improvement projects, then that would probably, depending on how Brisbane works, it would probably take the form of some other type of document informed by the plan. So it's really important to make sure that the plan makes sense in terms of how your policy structures work, how your laws work within the city. So then it makes it easier to move that planning and help inform the policy work that has to happen after it. So that's one thing. As far as mistakes go, looking back, I think that we've been able to navigate some of the things that maybe weren't thought through entirely in terms of being able to move that plan into policy. We were successful in moving it into policy, but there were things that were recommended in the plan that were just not legally possible, or possible in terms of the city's structure and how it functions. So I think I would suggest, making sure that whoever is developing your plan gets to has a greater understanding of how your city functions in terms of policies and things like that. So then that can be much more cohesive in terms of that movement to legal requirements. The other thing I would say, or ordinances, or however the city functions. Again, we were successful to be able to do that, but there were certain things that we kind of had to tweak to make sure that it fit into how the city does its business.
So could you elaborate a little bit more on what an example of what was in your plan that wasn't legally possible or something, or maybe what you had to tweak? Can you give us a little bit of information or example on that?
Well, so for example, there might have been definitions in the plan that we later kind of tweaked, or there may have been, in order for it to make sense, there were some recommendations about, to the extent legally being able to pool funding for public art projects. Well, in reality, sometimes that's not possible, so there are things like that were kind of outlined, but from an actual administrative perspective and being able to function within a policy or a legal framework needed a little tweaking to make sure it would work.
Okay, and then one more question on that aspect. When it was tweaked, was that something, to your knowledge, do you know yeah, it went back to the original consultant that you hired to tweak it, or was that something that was done in their legal department? Or how was that done? Do you know?
Yeah, it was done by, it was again informed by the plan. So the framework was from the plan, and then it was reviewed by city staff from the Commission for Arts and Culture at the time, working with the city's deputy city attorney at the time. So there was kind of you know, and then engaging other city staffers as needed to clarify things.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, where am I here? Would you change anything
Well, it's
on
really,
your,
yeah. Would I change anything? I mean, that's a good question. You know, the plan obviously is quite old, but when you still look at it, there's still many things that were thoughtfully done and still relevant today. That we were, you know, it's kind of a guide we use, but our program has springboarded and is much more robust at this point. In terms of what I would change, it was really long. So, you know, I think we can be more concise in terms of planning these days. I also think we're in a different place and time than when this plan was created. So I think it's really, the engagement component is really important today. Ensuring that you're working through kind of a DEIA type of a lens is going to be really important for your public art planning process. You might want to consider engaging artists, which they didn't do at the time, but it's kind of an interesting process to be able to engage artists to help with the public engagement, whether they're social practice artists or community-based artists to help with your public art engagement process in the planning. That's something that you might want to look for. So you're actually hiring and paying artists to, you know, help with, to become your partner and work with the consultant to help think through in different ways to engage and outreach to community as part of your process.
okay, thank you. And does the document still feel suited for today? And I know for you, this is going on almost 20 years. It looks like it's an 18-year-old document. So, I mean, would you consider, like, as a living doc, is it something that needs to be updated? If you were to update it, would you start all over? Or just get the same consultant, or just hire one to tweak it? If you know, is it relevant to what's going on, you know, 18 years later?
On many fronts, it is still relevant. What's more relevant to us today is the policy that came out of that, which kind of further defines what we do, and all the programmatic things we do from that. So you know, our focus at the City of San Diego is a larger planning process for a cultural plan. Public art will weave its way into that on some level, but it won't be like a true public art master plan. Again, much broader, looking at creative industries, looking at different, you know, artists and different types of artists, not just public artists and public art type of programs. You know, we've kind of refreshed from a programmatic perspective our program on a regular basis. So we haven't felt the need to go back to this document because the program is much more robust and has a life of its own. But this is still, many of the recommendations, which were over 50 that came out of this, have informed our program and continue to inform our program as we do our administration and our selection of artists. So it was a springboard and continues to be. But at this point, our focus is more on the cultural planning process versus starting a public art master planning process again.
Okay, thank you. What piece of advice would you give for a committee like us, we need, trying to establish a public art master plan?
Well, I mean, I guess I would ask, are you starting a public art program? Is there a public art program in Brisbane at all?
Well, we do have, yes, we have an account with, we have a structure. So we have like a certain amount of the developers after a certain, there's an account, we have funds, so that part we do have.
We have a committee.
We have the committee, of course, we have this committee that is Park and Rec committee members, city council, and community members. And so we, wanted to have this public art master plan so we could go forward and give us a guideline and get public engagement on future projects.
Yeah, my advice would be to ensure that you have staff that are experienced and knowledgeable about operating and managing public art programs. I think that will be really important for your program to be successful in the future. That will probably be a section in your public art master plan that a consultant will probably recommend that. So that would be something to just start thinking about. The success of a program will also be if it's required, in terms of integrating artwork into your capital projects, or integrating artwork into, or ensuring, I guess, that developers are integrating artwork into development projects, whether that's, non-residential in our case, or if you're able to do non-residential and residential. That will be something probably that will come out of this in terms of a recommendation as well. And then I think it's also important to not forget about collections management. So not all public art projects culminate in a tangible artwork, but many of them do. And so you have to have a really solid and strong collection management policy. This again might come out of your public art master planning process. Again, not all projects end up with the actual tangible artwork that would be owned by your city, but if they do, who's responsible for them, who maintains them, who manages the collection, the conservation of that collection, how they're publicly accessible. So our public art master plan has some recommendations. And from that, we developed some of that informed our law in the city of San Diego, such as definitions of artists and artwork and collections management activities and how those are funded. It also helped inform what we developed, which was a collection management policy for the city. The city of San Diego has over 1,000 artworks in its collection. Our collection not only includes artwork, public artworks that are integrated into like buildings, but also, for lack of a better word, portable artworks, paintings, small sculptures, works on paper that are then displayed throughout the city's public buildings, civic buildings, libraries, parks. So it's important to think about that because it's one of the things that often is forgotten in terms of the public art master planning process. And also lots of programs have been playing catch up with that because they're still learning. Some of our staff and myself came out of museums when we started. And so we kind of already had that collection background, understood what needed to happen. So, as far as staffing goes, having somebody with that expertise would be important if indeed you're interested in having a collection or actual tangible artwork come out of, your program down the line as well. The other thing that's really important is to ensure that you're using best practices. And there are a number of white papers and kind of best practice documents through the Americans for the Arts. So Americans for the Arts is a national organization. They do have a public art network. That public art network, again, has put out different kind of best practices in running and public art program and how to contract with artists. In California, there's certain things you have to think about from a legal perspective in terms of your contracting. With California Art Preservation Act, which is a California state law, there's state laws or national laws regarding the Visual Artists' Rights Act. So making sure, this is kind of a little bit more detailed than what's going to be in your master plan, but really important. They might say something like, just a couple lines for some of these things, but there's a lot in between those lines that you'll have to think about as you're really building out a robust structure for your program.
Danette, you're muted again.
Okay, sorry. The contract, the California Preservation Act, some of these topics, either to protect the city or that an artist, needs, there needs to be these guidelines. Are these things in your master plan? And do you have, another question is, in your master plan, do you have a sample or guidelines on contracts when you go hire an artist to do a sculpture in, a public area or a mural or something like that? Is that part of the framework of your master plan?
I don't believe that the master plan included like actual legal contract templates or anything, because those really change through so many different iterations over time. But it did outline the need for those types of things. It outlined the need for collections management. It did outline a number of things about donors and commissions and how you acquire artwork. So there is a whole kind of section on collections management that might be a good start for you to review within our public art master plan. I'm also happy to share the link to our collections management policy. If you might find that helpful, just to think through some of those more collection-based questions. So that might be a good start. I think there is a boilerplate contract on American for the Arts Public Art Network. There's a lot of resources and tools that you could tap on their website from, different municipalities and state agencies about, again, best practices, artist contracts, some of the things you have to think about, like I mentioned.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that ends our list of questions. I'll turn it back to the committee and we'll start with Camille. Seems like you have 3 questions, and then Karen. So go ahead, Camille. You're muted.
I'm sorry, I was going to let Karen go first. Her hand was up before mine.
We're a really kind little town. Everybody's very respectful. Thanks, Camille. The question I have, and this goes into this whole probably collection management policy, best practices, etc., is we have heard along the line that the art ownership issue can be kind of thorny. Can you expand on that a little bit, just from the perspective of, have you had those issues? I mean, we heard a story yesterday that was like, wow, that was very unfortunate that things ended up this way. And making sure that whatever contract or whatever situation you're in, that it is 100% locked down, the art ownership side of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So I think this kind of goes beyond kind of the public art master planning process and becomes more kind of your structure administration. But as far as acquisitions go, typically you're going to acquire artwork, assuming that you're going to have a tangible artwork at the end. You're going to acquire it there's a couple methodologies, right? There could be, in terms of acquisition, one could be commission. So if you're commissioning an artist, you're going to have a legal contract. It's going to outline really clearly who owns this artwork at the end of the day, which would be the city of Brisbane, I would assume. So that would be really clear. And then there would, basically, it is not owned by the city until the end. And then there would be a transfer of title document that would transfer that title from after the artist completes the scope of work, it's installed, provides any documentation or maintenance manual needed. One of those deliverables at the very end would be a transfer of title document that would be notarized. And then that would essentially identify your acquisition, the year it was acquired, and then, you develop your internal kind of collection management records based on that. So then you have a very clearly defined ownership trail. Sometimes you might entertain the idea of accepting a donation. If you do that, then there would be a donation agreement involved, and that would clearly identify the transmittal of the property from the donor to the city. There might be times when you purchase an artwork. So in those cases, there might be a bill of sale, which would clearly identify the transaction of the city's purchase of let's say, an existing artwork. So all of those types of paper trails become part of your collection records. So each artwork would have an accession record, and then any types of documentation would be part of that record. And those are typically managed through a collection management database, and then obviously kind of electronic files. Sometimes original files if needed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks. It's just, if something comes up that's a red flag along the way, I have to try and get to the bottom of how do we avoid that one?
When you avoid a red flag, or
Avoiding getting into a situation where there's controversy, and I'm assuming just clear policies up front is going to be our best practice for that.
yeah, and to that end, I would say that the city's public art master plan did outline that all artist contracts should be held by our office. So prior to that plan, there was other departments that were facilitating contracts with artists, and that's where things can get kind of messy. So it's important to have one body who really understands artist contracts, understands what's needed, and really facilitates that for your city.
Great, thank you.
You kind of answered part of the questions I had. And I know that you weren't there in the making of the master plan. So given that, but I guess my question is, you spoke a lot about the committee who is looking for this consultant to put together a master plan with input, and then how the process of creating that master plan and what the engagements were in creating that master plan. I was wondering if you felt, or if you had heard how, in other words, yes, the committee has to do the homework, but the person who is guiding you and creating this master plan should have all these resources in their back pocket. And I guess my question was, when you engaged with the person who was helping, how did they feel about the person coming with their pockets filled with resources and information from the various organizations that you reached out to create a master plan? I guess you could look at the same thing with your cultural master plan right now.
Well, I mean, in terms of, a lot of our efforts are staff-led, staff that have experience and knowledge, and are arts administrators that are professionals, right? So our team back then, as well as now, helped lead it from a city perspective. And so we were at the time, and now, the contract administrators and thought leaders working with those consultants. So it was a joint effort, right? In terms of facilitating this, we might have the resources, we might be able to, we know who the stakeholders may be. So we're kind of helping, right, the consultants. So we're working together to make sure they have all the information they need in order to do some of their work, if that makes any sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, Brisbane's a much, much smaller community than San Diego. We're like 4,000 people, so we don't have as many government staff offices as you do. So there's a little difference there.
Yeah. Have you guys reached out to some of the smaller cities in your area, like, just to, okay. So you're doing your homework. Got it.
We met with Belmont yesterday. They're about 11,000. I think that's somewhere around there. And they just completed their master plan, 2021. So I think that population's from different cities that we looked at a lot of different cities' master plans. We picked ones that we identified with. So, you're much larger, but there are parts of yours that we thought was very intriguing. And then Belmont was similar in size to ours. So we met with them yesterday. So, and I don't know, we might have some more coming up. I'm not sure. So before we go any further.
The other difference is that although we're a small city, we have a lot of development in our city that we're planning. So right now we have $1 million sitting in our fund for public art, which I know compared to San Diego is not a lot, but compared to small cities, that is a lot. And we have 550 acres that are planned to be developed, and that's going to probably have billions of dollars worth of development put on it. So we'll have, at some point, millions of dollars worth of public art funds available. So that's the reason we're looking at bigger cities and smaller cities, just to try and get a overall sense of, how do we do not only can we compare ourselves to a Belmont, but at some point, we will have enough money to compare ourselves to something like a Pasadena or something like that as well. And we've reached out to Pasadena, we've reached out to Berkeley as other cities in this process as well.
That's really exciting. It's really nice. It's exciting to hear that you guys are, forward thinking and kind of, preparing now for the windfall, it sounds like, that you might have down the road.
Okay, any other comments from committee members? Okay, and then what about staff? Any more comments on from staff? Nope. Okay, well, I think that wraps up. We're just a little bit over our original time slot. So I want to thank you so much, Christine, for joining
Thank you
us and
so
all your
much.
insight. We really appreciate it. And we may have to have some more questions by email if we think of them later, but we really appreciate your time and your knowledge and all the experience that you have in dealing with your city and your master art plan, that you can, give us some guidance and information. So, it'll help us in our process as well.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Yeah, we thank you so much for your time.
And Christine sent a web link on our chat, so I forwarded it to you guys, but I'll just copy and paste it into an email to you guys so you guys can explore at a later date.
So
Okay.
fun, I'm going to send you one more, which is
Okay.
our civic art collection,
Great.
which is actually online, so you can kind of see, all those foundational things on what happens after you have a collection, and all the fun stuff you can do with the collection in terms of access, education, opportunities. So that's just a link to our public access portal where we have all of our collection online. The city's collections, typically accessible in city public buildings, but sometimes not everything's on view, right? Because it is a collection, but you can kind of get a sense there. As for your process, I'm wishing you all the best of luck as you navigate this. I would highly encourage you to check out American for the Arts Public Art Network and look at all their resources and tools. If you have any follow-up questions or just want to have a follow-up conversation, I'm happy to meet with you again.
And
All right.
Thank you.
very much appreciate the idea of American for the Arts. I mean, we've used them as our model for the contract that we, and the RFPs that we've put out so far. So we very much appreciate that. That is a very good resource.
Definitely is.
Yep.
Nice to meet you all.
All right,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much. Bye.
Bye, Christine. All right. Oh, she jumped off. Okay, well, I don't have any public comments that have come in for this meeting. That jumped off. I don't know if you guys wanted to have any further conversation about it, the meeting, or you guys good?
It's just really helpful.
It is
Yeah.
helpful.
It's just asking questions and just learning new things. I mean, gosh.
Yeah, and it's great because you can find what resonates with your understanding and where you want, what makes sense to you or what you go, oh. So I'm fine with,
Okay.
Yeah, it's, I mean, staying out of trouble. That's my mantra. It's stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
that ain't gonna happen.
No, girl, but we try.
And I know
Okay,
we don't
I'm back.
have any meetings set for October, so I'll probably do a doodle poll for you guys just to kind of continue on with our good work here. Does anybody from this group so far have any vacation days planned that I could write down real quick, just 2 weeks that I could avoid? Go ahead, Karen.
It's not a vacation. I'm going back to Australia to help my mom, and I will be gone the 2nd of well, I'll basically be gone the entire November.
All of November. So October you'll be here.
Yes. But if something comes up that's urgent, I am going to be at the city council meeting on the 17th, but I'm not going to have my IT man with me this time. So I'm a little nervous to try and set up any meetings.
Okay.
there.
And then you won't be back till after Thanksgiving, whatever that date is,
Correct. I'll land back here on the 29th.
29th. Okay. Anybody else for October or maybe November that they know of?
No, we don't have I'm not available October 26th. But we don't have another meeting scheduled yet, is that correct?
Right. So I'm just writing just down some days that I know are just definitely, just so I can keep the doodle poll a little bit more concise.
Quick
Um,
question, are we reaching out to
October-
past,
October 28th for me.
Thank you.
are we reaching out to Pasadena
We did.
And-
Yeah.
and
They-
Berkeley?
We did. We spoke to both of them. We gave you notes from them.
Oh, okay. I
We
guess I
did
don't
not
have
have
that.
time available to meet with the committee as a whole.
Mhm. And we reached out to
Salinas.
Salinas a couple of times and
They haven't responded.
Okay,
So we can talk about it if you want others. It might make some sense as we're getting more into trying to start working through the master plan process to have like a regular meeting once a month. So that way we don't have to try and do doodle polling all the time.
mhm.
yeah,
And that way we can announce it to the public ahead of time as
Mhm.
opposed to on an ad hoc basis, kind of like all the other committees do.
okay,
So we can add that to into the October agenda or in a future agenda when we get to it.
Mhm. It seems like everyone does pretty well on Monday evenings generally, but, or we have been doing Tuesday evenings, excuse me, right? So, okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
all
Hey,
right.
Stuart.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're wherever you are, it's very dark.
I'm in the office. I will have somebody get a ring light.
Yeah, you look like, I don't know, gremlin in the background.
Ah,
Oh, I thought you were in a wine cellar. I was jealous.
I was going for goblin as opposed to gremlin. So
oh my gosh.
I
Maybe
wasn't
I
quite
should
there.
adjourn the meeting though first. Hold on now.
All right. Oh,